You'll see in our springform pan, this is a raw cheesecake with a beautiful mint chocolate ganache drizzled over top. It's got all the wonderful decadence you would ever desire without all the bad, and there's no cow. Now, cow, if we make a cheesecake, you got a lot of dense milk in there. Milk, unfortunately, is very mucus forming for the body because it's pasteurized at about 2,000 degrees and it destroys the casein enzyme you need to digest it with. So here you have an alternative to cheesecake without getting all that mucus formation in cow. Instead, we're going to use cashews as our main body for the filler. Cashews are profoundly nutritious, very high source of protein, good source of selenium and zinc, which isn't well known. And you also get wonderful fiber that keeps you nice and regular and consistent. Let's get the rest of our ingredients out. So this is going to be our alternative to cow. It's going to make our cheesy consistency. First, we have to make our crust. And this whole recipe, we can just use the food processor, which is nice and easy. Have 2 cups of pecans. And any other seed that could be sprouted should be sprouted. So if you take the time and soak your nuts and seeds, it helps to release the enzyme inhibitor. It'll make them more digestible, but you'll find pecans are sold in the half. They're already taken out of the shell. They're not going to sprout. They're not going to germinate, but you will release some of the enzyme inhibitor by soaking them. And a nice thing to do with your nuts and seeds, you can take and soak them, put them in the food dehydrator and dry them, and then put them back into storage indefinitely pretty much. They're there to use whenever you need them. I've also got 2 tablespoons of raw cacao powder, a wonderful source. It's the natural source of chocolate, which we've all been trained, I think, to think that chocolate is bad. Cacao was a staple by the Mayans. It was used in Mexico as a currency. It's highly forming in energy, and it's one of the highest antioxidant-rich foods we have. In Europe, like Germany, they'll actually use it in cancer therapies. Dark, bitter, sweet chocolate will actually be prescribed to cancer patients because we know antioxidants fight cancer. So here's a cancer-fighting food that's going to give you wonderful flavors and decadence. But before I mix in anything else, I'm going to do a quick grind because we want to get our pecans into a nice fine kind of a flour. Grind this up to a coarse grind. Add in about 4 dates. The dates are going to help bind this together for our crust. Pinch of sea salt. And we got our crust. Let's get a pie pan. Now you see I use the springform pan. That's real pretty. You can also put it into a glass pie pan. So we have a beautiful little kind of graham cracker style crust here. Now we'll just press this in. The dates give it a little bit of moisture. They're a really good source of potassium, which is nice. You could use almonds if you wanted almond flour. You'll find pecans will give you that little bit of sweetness naturally in the nut, so I think it's a perfect one for using in the crust. Going to press this guy in, and then we'll make our filling. And if we time this, this isn't very complicated. It looks like it for the steps you go through, but it's really a pretty easy pie to make. There's our chocolate crust. Now let's go to our filling. I've got 4 cups of cashews, and yes, of course, we have soaked them. Soaked them for about 4 hours. I think that's about the right time for a cashew. And of course, these are the pieces. We bought the pieces. They're much cheaper this way. And these pieces, when they're soaked, they break down easier. They're nice and soft. If you don't soak your cashews, it's not going to come out as creamy. You could still do it, but soak them for a good 4 hours and you'll find this will blend up nice and smooth and creamy. I need 1 cup of agave. The agave, of course, is a natural sweetener from the agave plant. It has a modest glycemic index to it. There we go. I think this is the one to use modestly as an indulgent food. What I like about agave is agave doesn't give you an aftertaste. Stevia and all the other sweeteners, I can taste it at the end. This just tastes dead on like sugar, so it gives you all the sweet quality. And in this case, it's got kind of a thick texture like a corn syrup. So it's going to help the texture of our dish right here. And I've also got a cup full of cacao butter. And you see I've had my little double boiler going here. I took hot water from the stand, put it in here, to another dish in, and that melts the cacao butter, which comes in this little packet. For the whole recipe, it took 1 block. This block is nice and blonde, kind of a color, nice, thick, dense, which is just the butter that comes from the cacao bean. We're going to take it, about a cup's worth. We'll pour that in. Now, when this gets cold, it solidifies, so this is going to give nice body and a thick texture to your cheesecake. What else do we need? Water, 1 cup of water. Good idea. Happen to have one right here. And I believe I needed some vanilla, did I not? There's a second to the vanilla motion. About a teaspoon. About a teaspoon. Just 1 for safety. There's a teaspoon. And we'll stick this up, and don't be afraid to let this blend. Sometimes, you know, especially like when you did the crust, you don't want to go too far and make it into pecan butter. In this case, let it blend and blend and blend. You want this really smooth and creamy because you're making a cheesecake. This is going to be the body of the cheesecake. So don't worry about it. You've got enough fluid in there that'll prevent it from turning into butter. But if you don't go long enough, you'll have a chunky cheesecake. We'll let that blend for a moment, and then we'll get our ganache ready, and we're out the door. Let's stick this one over here. And the cacao butter. And peppermint. Now, if you can't find in your local area the cacao butter like this, as a suitable exchange, you could use coconut oil. Coconut oil does the same thing when it gets cold. It solidifies. Not quite as hard as the cacao butter, but you've also got long-chain fatty acids. The lauric acid are essential for the body and help the immune system. So coconut oil is a perfect exchange to mix in here if you don't have the cacao butter. And you can find coconut oil pretty easily in most any store. I think easier than the cacao. Now let's just dump this one right on in. Let's get our spatula out. Nice thick texture. Six. You see in this pan, it actually sticks out a lot more than in the spring form. And what I would suggest is just take it without breaking the pie pan. If you do that, it releases the air bubbles, so when you cut it, you won't have these big holes in your pie. What was that? Oh. Now, I'm going to stick this in the freezer for a moment, just to get it to solidify, and rinse this out, and then we'll make our ganache, and we're done. We did a cheesecake before, a strawberry cheesecake. This is pretty similar. This recipe comes from Raw Revolution, just like our other dishes tonight. So it's a little different in the recipe. We don't have the lemon juice in this one that we had in the other. Oops. And I like the flavor in this. The lemon, to me, in the last one we did a year ago, almost took over the dish. So I like this one with the chocolate. It tasted better. Now, to make our ganache, half a cup of cacao powder, so our wonderful antioxidant going in. And anybody that's ever had kidney stones have been through that. If you're going to have cacao, it's nice to have other dishes with magnesium. So in a crust, instead of using the pecans, it's not a bad idea to use almonds, because when oxalic acid that's found naturally in spinach, it's found in chocolate, when that comes in combination with calcium, it calcifies and it forms calcium oxalate, and that's what a calcium oxalate stone is in the kidney. Now when magnesium touches oxalic acid, it liquefies. So if you've got a food rich in oxalic acid and you want to prevent that calcification potential, try to have other foods that are rich in magnesium. That magnesium will bond off with the oxalic acid. It'll stay in a liquid state and never be a problem for you. So as an alternative to your crust, you could use almonds in your crust, which gives you high magnesium, and that'll counterbalance the oxalic acid potential of the chocolate. In this case, I say you've got a very low amount of chocolate. I have no worry in here. This is not a copious amount in any way, but I had to throw that in. And let's see, what else do I need? My half cup of cacao butter going in there to spin around. Let's get every last drop to make it good.
A fourth a cup of agave.
Fourth of a cup. A little extra sweetener in there. Instead of agave, you could use maple syrup. You could use honey, and I think honey will take over a little bit. But the agave seems to be perfect because you don't get the aftertaste in it at all. And we need some mint, do we not?
Mint extract.
A quarter teaspoon. I better measure this one and not guess, because a quarter goes a long way. The peppermint can take your breath away. And if you're not sure, just take a swig of this straight. They used to make this mouth freshener, and I don't know that they do anymore. It was called Wow, W-O-W. And it was just peppermint extract and a little chlorophyll. And boy, 2 shots on your tongue, it would take your breath away. So if you want a cheap little breath freshener, just take a little taste of peppermint oil. And it'll make you say, wow. Peppermint's nice and thermally cooling, which is nice. Now look how fast that was. You see the rich, thick ganache we have here? This will go back to our freezer. They're about thick. Doesn't take long. We're going to spread this right on the top. And just give it a nice little minty chocolate layer on top of your wonderful cheesecake. Now what did that take us? About 10 minutes? And that was with me babbling. If I wasn't babbling and I was just making this dish, I bet you we could do it in under 10 minutes easy. So often these dishes, people say, boy, I like the dish, but it's too complicated. I'm not going to make that one at home. This one's pretty easy. You just have to plan out a little bit, think ahead of time, because you got to soak your cashews to get them soft a few hours. So when you wake up in the morning, you want to make this dish later in the day, throw some cashews, 4 cups in a little water, let them soak, and then when you're ready to make your dish, you know you got under 10 minutes. I want to challenge anybody out there in the whole world, show me any cheesecake that they can make in less than 10 minutes. You can't do that with a cooked cheesecake. It's impossible.
How do you feel about soaking the nuts and then putting them in the freezer and taking them out when you're ready to use them?
How do I feel about soaking the nuts, putting them into the freezer, and then pulling out when ready to use them?
I soak almonds all night.
Now, my assumption is that you're soaking the nut, drying it, and then freezing it, or you're soaking it and putting the water right into the freezer.
I don't dry the nuts. Because if I make almond milk, I just soak them and then make almond milk.
You know, I have no problem with it. The only thing in freezing is it does expand the cell walls, so some of the nutrient factors can deteriorate because of the expansion of the freezing. But I say that's marginal, and it's certainly a stable way, but I almost feel like there's no need. I would rather soak them, throw them in the dehydrator, and then they're stable. Storing them in the fridge isn't a bad idea. Maintaining them in a cool temperature to keep the oils intact. And then by freezing, arguably even oils like flax oil that go rancid so easily, putting them in the freezer prevents the rancidification. So I think it's not a bad idea, truly. Probably is one of the better ideas. There you go. You guys ready to eat?
Yes.
Let's do it. Let's get a good knife to cut it with.